All right, hey, welcome to lecture 2 of April 20th. I know I'm dressed down a little bit, got the hat going on here. Actually got out and ran a little bit today, which is kind of fun, but then I had to come home and I didn't want to do my hair again, so I just threw a hat on, so I'm sorry. But I wanted to get these up late tonight so that you could watch them all day on Tuesday, because I've got a whole nother set coming for you on Wednesday and a whole nother set coming for you on Friday. So I wanted to make sure that you got the adequate time you would need to watch these lectures. So in lecture 1, we talked about the prophetic nature and ministry of Jesus in relationship to the systems and structures that we're talking about in these systemic evils that continue to perpetuate the racial in disparity, the racial injustice. What I want to talk about and explore a little bit more are these systems and structures. And so lecture 2 is titled, "We Are Creators." There's this great quote from a book that I just stumbled upon accidentally, but I'm reading fervently right now to try to finish before the end of this week because it's so profound. It's called Prophetic Rage, a Post-Colonial Theology of Liberation by Johnny Bernard Hill. And it's an assessment of black theology. And it's just absolutely stunning in terms of its breadth and its depth. And he makes this statement. He says, "There is no soul salvation without social and political liberation from systems of power and domination that crush the soul and spirit." Let me say that again. There is no soul salvation without social and political liberation from systems of power and domination that crush the soul and the spirit. That's a profound statement that's on your notes that's listed there. When we talk about systemic injustice, the question is, what can we do? We often feel powerless. Well, so I think it's important from the beginning to know what systems and structures do for us, okay? So I would say, I'm going to just be descriptive in terms of how we can understand what systems and structures do for humanity as we organize ourselves as human communities. First, they are the means, now get this, they are the means of organizing complex activities into manageable experiences. So I want you to think about that. Complex activities into manageable experiences. Think buying a house. Buying a house is a complex activity. There are loans and real estate agents and legal contracts and all of that goes into that system. It's a complex activity, but it's broken down into a manageable experience. And so systems, the housing market is a system and structure that breaks down those complex activities into manageable experiences. It's necessary, it's valid, and it's valuable. Second thing they do, they facilitate at their best the highest aspirations of the culture. So they are the means of facilitating what culture values and sort of helping humanity live into its highest aspirations. So think in terms of the education system. The education system is about marshaling the gifts, qualities, and talents of students so that they can participate in the flourishing of humanity. That is what systems and structures do. Third, at their best, they mitigate against arbitrary barriers of participation in the social landscape. They mitigate against arbitrary barriers of participation in the social landscape. Meaning this, think the judicial system. The judicial system is set up to ensure fair and equitable treatment so that there are no arbitrary distinctions that keep people from participating in their right, in their fullness of seeking this flourishing life in the social landscape that they participate in. Fourth, they provide for and promote holistic care so that we avoid unnecessary exemption from participation in that social landscape. Think about this, the healthcare system. The healthcare system is to ensure that it provides and promotes this holistic care so that people aren't arbitrarily kept from their participation in what's happening around them because of some malady that could have been taken care of, healed, some preventative medicine that could have been given to them to keep them from unnecessarily becoming dependent on a system. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that people's bodies aren't just broken and they may have to be dependent upon a system. But what healthcare system does not only takes care of the most vulnerable, but it ensures that those who might experience unnecessary exemptions are healed, made whole, and that they can participate fully. They're the social lubricant for human exchange. Think in terms of the economy or capitalism. It's the social lubricant for human exchange. It's a system and structures just so that we can exchange valuable items and make money and exchange items, and we're not having to barter on corners constantly for what we have. But it's a social lubricant. It makes easier the transaction of everyday ordinary experiences. They're the necessary substance of human creation. Did you hear that? They are the necessary substance of human creation that seeks to ensure organized, just, and flourishing opportunities for human existence. At least that is the case in the West. That they are the creation of humanity, and the purpose is to ensure a society that is well organized, that is just, and that promotes flourishing opportunities for the whole of humanity. And systems and structures, they don't define us. I think that's important for us. I don't know that that's always the case. I think too often our political systems define us, our economic systems define us, but they're not supposed to define us. However, they do remove the barriers for unnecessary, unjust, and arbitrary categories that would exempt us from participation. That's what systems and structures are designed to do at their best. And I'm sure there's many more, but those are the ones that I want to highlight for today. And I think you can see how each of those is directly connected to a form of system and structure that we're familiar with, whether healthcare, judicial system, education, et cetera, et cetera. But because they are human-made, they are susceptible to both human perversion and corruption. When systems and structures are co-opted by the principalities and powers of darkness at work and lurking in humanity, and they're brought under that domination system that I explained in lecture number 1, they become unfair, divvying out opportunity and accessibility based upon arbitrary categories of inclusion. Did you get that? They become unfair. They divvy out both opportunity and accessibility based upon these arbitrary categories, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, sexual preference, these arbitrary categories for participation. They become unjust. They become unjust. So they're unfair and they become unjust, unnecessarily creating arbitrary litmus tests for participation, equality, and access. So there's litmus tests that are a part of this. Can you stop them, Derek, please? Or my dogs decided in the middle of my lecture to run around and have a field day, and Derek was just sitting there laughing instead of actually doing something about it. So for those of you who dozed off for a moment, that was your, hey, and like Jesse said, hey, I reconnected. Well, you just reconnected there. Fantastic. All right, they're unfair, they're unjust. They become dignity stealing, okay? Meaning this, when you bind people to bureaucratic systems that feel like there's a great futility in it, they demoralize, they demean, they dismiss, they create systems of dependency. That's what happens when systems become warped and perverted. People become numbers and case files rather than people with stories and names. They're demeaned, they're demoralized, and they're sent down paths of red tape that they can't do anything about, and it feels like it's futile for them to do anything about it. They become traumatic, that at their worst, they operate out of fear and punishment, and they traumatize people, stilting their personal growth. And there is investigative studies happening right now to find out if it's possible that entire generations are inheriting the trauma of the generation that went from at a genetic level. Can trauma holistically impact us so deeply that it can actually warp and twist us at a genetic level where we inherit that trauma into the next generation? And here's one of the challenges for these structures and systems that become unjust and unfair. They're disguised and explicit at the same time. So they sort of hide, but they're made known out in the public, and it leaves people feeling like, am I crazy? Is anybody else seeing what is happening here? And it makes us call into question our own sanity. And they're insidious, they become evil, operate violently, and like the thief in John 10:10, they steal, kill, and destroy. At their best, they organize human engagement, human activity, and the social environment and landscape that we find ourselves. At the worst, they become perverse, manipulative, exploitive, and ultimately limiting and violent. It's systemic. What impact can we possibly have? But humans build the systems. This is the good news. Humans build the systems. Humans can evaluate these systems. Humans can dismantle these systems. Humans can reform these systems. Humans are not helpless. They're co-creators with God, called to make a more just future and eliminate the barriers that keep people from flourishing. So when we move into this, this operates as the backdrop against which we're going to talk about healthcare, which are the two videos you're going to watch with these TED Talks. When we talk about education, incarceration, housing, we understand that these are all systems and structures that at their best make for human flourishing, at their worst steal dignity and steal lives. But we can do something about it as we evoke not only the prophetic critique, but also the prophetic imagination that we talked about in the first lecture.